The janitor knew how to save her. Nobody would let him in. That is where this story begins. Not in a boardroom, not in a hospital with marble floors and a waterfall in the lobby. It begins in a tea shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. A man named Elias Hayes, a mop he had already used 4 times, and a radio broadcast that turned his hands to ice. Breaking this morning, the only daughter of tech billionaire Donatella Harrington has just 24 hours to live. He froze. The mop handle dropped, hit the floor. The sound of it barely registered. Zara Harrington, age 8, deep coma, severe headaches beginning after sunset, confusion, bluish lips, irregular heartbeat. Doctors say they are, at this hour, at a loss. Elias's throat worked because he had heard those exact words before. About someone he loved, 14 years ago, and that time, nobody listened. He buried his 14-year-old sister in a white dress while a sunrise came through the window anyway. Indifferent, golden, wrong. He knew what was killing Zara Harrington. The question was whether anyone would let a night shift janitor through the front door long enough to say it. It was 7:30 in the morning at Rivera's, Soledad Rivera's tea shop, tucked between a dry cleaner and a hardware store on Clement Street. The kind of place where the little bell above the door still rang the same way it did in 2005. Soledad had never fixed it, said it brought people luck. Elias had been there since 6, after his shift at County General Hospital. He mopped when he could not sleep. He mopped when the memories came back. Outside, November rain pressed flat against the glass door, turned the streetlights into long amber smears. Soledad set a mug of strong black tea beside the radio without being asked. No sugar, just the way he took it. She had done that for 3 years without either of them ever discussing it. The way good neighbors understand things without needing them said. Then the radio crackled, and those words, at a loss. Elias gripped the back of the nearest chair. Her name was Daisy, 14 years old. She kept a spiral notebook with the names of every stray cat on the block written in purple marker. The night before she died, she had tugged his sleeve and said, "Hey, tomorrow let's go up on the roof and watch the sunrise, before school." He had said yes. He always said yes to Daisy. But the next morning, the room held a stillness that had no business being there. A faint smell he did not yet have a name for. Something invisible, odorless to most, but present. The way certain dangers are present, quiet and patient and entirely without mercy. Carbon monoxide, an old generator, a blocked vent. Elias had been 20 years old. 2 years into an environmental engineering degree when it happened. After Daisy, he never went back to class. The textbooks stayed on the shelf. The notebooks stayed in the drawer. He took a night shift job at the hospital, because hospitals were the one place where being invisible still felt like it mattered. He mopped floors in the small hours. He learned ventilation schematics from maintenance manuals left on break room tables. He memorized building layouts after a single walkthrough. A photographic memory he had never told anyone about, because the last thing a janitor needs is to be accused of showing off. He just watched, and remembered, and waited for a reason that never seemed to come. Until now, on the bus, heading across the city through the rain, he grabbed a napkin from his jacket pocket and a stubby pencil and wrote fast. Check carboxyhemoglobin levels. AIHVAC firmware. Chimney blocked. Possible software bug. Symptoms match CO exposure. His handwriting was shaking. He pressed his hand against his knee until it steadied. He knew what he looked like. He knew what people would see. The Warren County General logo on his chest, a bleach stain near the collar that no amount of washing had ever fully lifted. Shoes that had needed replacing for 2 years. I'm just a night janitor. Who would believe me? But Daisy's face would not let him go. He got off at the wrong stop, on purpose, stood in the rain with his eyes closed for 30 seconds. Then he walked, behind him. Forgotten on Soledad's counter, propped against the sugar jar, his phone sat quietly recording. He had accidentally opened the voice memo app when he grabbed his jacket. Every word of the broadcast, clean, clear, time-stamped, saved without him knowing. He would not discover that recording until 4 days later. By then, 11 million people would already know his name. Harrington Elite Medical Center did not look like a place where a child could be dying. It looked like a promise. All glass and polished steel, a lobby that smelled of eucalyptus, dove-gray leather chairs, an actual waterfall trickling down smooth black stone on the east wall. Elias stood just inside the automatic doors, rain dripping from his jacket onto the marble floor, the napkin going soft in his hand. He walked to the front desk, took a breath. "I know what's wrong with Zara Harrington." The receptionist looked up slowly. Her eyes moved, without hurry, without apology. From his face, to his jacket, to his shoes, her expression did not change. Not exactly, but something in it closed. "We only admit certified medical personnel," she said. Whether anyone in that building would listen, and what it would cost Elias either way, is the story we are about to tell. If this story has already reached you, if something in it already feels true, hit subscribe before we go further. Because the door that is about to close on Elias Hayes is not the end of this story. It is only the beginning. The note never made it past the trash can beside the front desk. The receptionist had taken it, not with both hands, the way you take something that matters, with 2 fingers, briefly, the way you handle something you have already decided about. She dropped it in the bin without reading past the first line. Elias watched it happen. He did not say anything. A security guard appeared from the side corridor. Darius Webb, tall, broad-shouldered, a deep and unhurried voice that made people instinctively slow down. His badge read, Darius Webb, Patient Services. He walked Elias outside with the quiet professionalism of someone doing a job he did not especially enjoy. The automatic doors slid shut behind them. Rain, hard now, coming in sideways. Elias stood under the narrow awning and looked at his hands. The napkin had dissolved into soft gray pulp. His phone rang. He already knew, before he looked, exactly who it was. "Hayes." His supervisor's voice carried the flat certainty of a man who had made his decision before dialing. "You walked out mid-shift. 2 hours to get back here, or you're done." A pause. Then something uglier surfaced beneath the flat tone. "And don't go playing hero somewhere. I know what happened to your family. Don't make the same mistake twice." The call ended. Elias sat down on the wet concrete step, pressed his face into his hands, stayed very still while the rain came down around him. The tears came quickly. The rain covered them neatly. Nobody walking by noticed. Which was, Elias thought, about right. 2 hours passed. He did not go back to County General. He sat. He thought. He got up once, walked to the corner, stood there looking at nothing in particular, came back, sat down again. At 9:20 in the morning, the side door of Harrington Elite Medical Center opened from the inside. Darius Webb stepped out, sat down on the step beside Elias without a word. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The particular quiet of 2 men who have both lost something and understand that about each other without needing it confirmed. "I used to be an EMT," Darius said finally. "Before this job." Elias looked at him. "Say the symptoms again," Darius said. "To me, slowly." Elias said them, every one. The mechanism of carbon monoxide binding to hemoglobin more aggressively than oxygen. The reason a standard pulse oximeter would display normal readings even as the blood became critically compromised. The AIHVAC firmware error. The blocked exhaust pathway that would never appear on a routine diagnostic. His voice steadied as he spoke. This was the language of what he knew. And what he knew had always been the one place where Elias Hayes felt fully present. Darius listened without interrupting. Then he stood, looked at the door, pressed his badge against the reader. 2 minutes, he said. That is all I can give you. The ICU was colder than the rest of the building. The lights were the blue-white of rooms where urgency has replaced comfort. The sounds were machinery. Hum. Beep. The soft-souled rhythm of people moving fast and quietly. Zara Harrington looked smaller than 8 years old. She lay in the center of the oversized hospital bed, as though she had been set down there carefully and had not moved since. Softly curled brown hair against the white pillow, small hands resting outside the blanket. Still. Her eyes opened when Elias came close. Brown, deep. The eyes of a child who had spent a great deal of time alone reading the expressions of adults. Dr. Anaya Patel appeared in the doorway. She studied Elias for a measured moment, not with contempt, but with the careful neutrality of someone still deciding. She keeps asking for her mother. You have 2 minutes. Elias sat beside the bed and took Zara's small, cool hand gently in his. Mama, she whispered. I'm scared. I know, he said quietly. My name's Elias. I think I know what's making you sick. Something in the heating system at your house, a software error that blocked the exhaust. Your body has been breathing something it cannot use. Zara's eyes focused on him, slowly, with effort. Last night, she whispered, I smelled something funny, but the house voice said, she stopped, swallowed. It said, sleep well, Zara. Something moved in Elias's jaw. He kept his face still. The house voice said, sleep well. The door swung open. Donatella Harrington filled the room without raising her voice. Tailored, composed, salt and pepper hair in a low bun. The kind of woman who has learned to wear authority the way other people wear coats. Half a step behind her, and somehow still managing to lead, was Celeste Whitmore. Ash blonde, impeccable, eyes the temperature of February. Security. Celeste's voice was measured and final. Get him out. Donatella had stopped moving. Her daughter, pale, barely conscious, motionless for 3 days, was holding a stranger's hand and not letting go. Elias stood slowly, looked at Donatella directly. Do not check standard oxygen saturation, he said. Check carboxyhemoglobin level specifically. A pulse oximeter will read completely normal even at critical CO concentrations. The molecule displaces oxygen at the cellular level. Your standard equipment will not catch it. Dr. Anaya went very still in the corner of the room. Celeste exhaled once, brief, professional. We are not revising this patient's treatment protocol based on a run the test, Donatella said. Quiet, flat, final. Something shifted behind Celeste's eyes. She said nothing. Elias was walked out by 2 nurses. He stood in the corridor on the other side of the glass wall, watching Donatella bend over her daughter's bed. Soledad Rivera appeared at his elbow. She had taken the crosstown bus in her work clothes, a brown folder tucked under her arm. She had not stopped to change. A maintenance contact at Harrington Dynamics reached out this morning, she said quietly. She handed him the folder. Inside, an internal HVAC service report, date stamped 48 hours earlier, a firmware error flag. And at the bottom, a signature on a repair delay authorization. Celeste Whitmore's signature. Elias stared at it. A folded piece of paper appeared under the ICU door. A nurse picked it up and carried it to him without comment. The handwriting was large and uneven, the letters of a child whose hand was very tired. Elias, please don't leave. I'm scared alone. Zara. Darius appeared at his shoulder. I believe you, he said softly. At the far end of the corridor, 2 security guards came around the corner at a brisk, deliberate pace. Celeste Whitmore walked between them, phone to her ear, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet hall. He is trespassing. Call the police. The handcuffs made a sound like a small, polite door closing. What those test results showed, and what Donatella Harrington was about to discover about the person she had trusted most, is a thing neither of them will ever fully recover from. Keep listening, because what is in that folder is only half the truth. The other half is far worse, and it changes everything. The results came back in 11 minutes. Dr. Anaya Patel had ordered them as a rush, quietly, using the particular clinical shorthand that means, before anyone upstairs can be consulted. She stood in the corridor holding the printout. Her face did what faces do when a number confirms something you hoped was wrong. Carboxyhemoglobin, 32%. Critical range. She walked to the waiting area where Donatella Harrington sat very straight in a leather chair, hands folded, looking at nothing. Anaya set the printout on the table between them, then stepped back and said nothing, because some information needs a moment before anyone speaks around it. Donatella picked up the results, read them, set them down. She stood, walked to the room where Celeste Whitmore was on her phone. She closed the door. "You knew," Donatella said. Not a question. The tone of a woman who has been running on adrenaline for 72 hours and has just arrived at the thing she was dreading finding. Celeste lowered her phone slowly. Her composure remained intact, which was, in that moment, more damning than anything she could have said. AI Home 3.0 is a $2 billion launch cycle, she said evenly. I assessed the probability distribution. The window of exposure was narrow. The risk was my daughter. Donatella's voice cracked, one clean fault line through years of practiced control. My 8-year-old daughter is a probability distribution to you. Celeste said nothing. Donatella looked at her for a long moment. Then she opened the door and walked back out into the corridor. Elias was sitting in a plastic chair in the hospital security office when she walked in. The handcuffs had been removed. The responding officer, a tired man named Hendricks, who had clearly been hoping for a quieter Tuesday, had established within 10 minutes that nothing chargeable had occurred. Donatella sat down across from him. She looked different from how she had looked in the ICU. The precision was still there, shoulders level, posture held. But something had gone out of her eyes, not weakness, something more like the end of a particular kind of certainty. She looked at Elias, and this time, for the first time, she actually looked. Not at his jacket, not at the County General logo, faded from 3 years of institutional laundering, not at the shoes, at him. I owe you an apology, she said. Elias said nothing. He had learned somewhere along the way that silence after an apology was sometimes the most honest response. It gave the other person room to mean what they had said. I looked at what you were wearing, she said quietly, instead of hearing what you were saying. I know, Elias said. It happens. It was not forgiveness, but it was something true, which was what the room needed. Then he picked up a paper napkin from the table beside the plastic chair, the cheap, thin kind stacked in dispensers by hospital coffee machines, and a pen from the security desk. And in approximately 15 seconds, he drew the complete HVAC ventilation schematic for the Harrington residence. Every junction, every pipe pathway, every exhaust valve, every sensor node and return air bypass, accurate in proportion, accurate in sequence, drawn from a maintenance manual he had seen once, 3 weeks earlier, left open on a break room table during a shift change. Dr. Anaya, who had followed Donatella in out of professional instinct and a mild inability to stay out of consequential rooms, took a slow step back. You drew that from memory, she said, from one look at a manual. I studied environmental engineering before I left school, Elias said. He capped the pen and set it back. I read things once and they stay. Why didn't you ever... Anaya stopped herself. Elias looked at her steadily. Tell anyone? He let that sit for a moment, because the last thing a night shift janitor needs is to seem like he's showing off. The room held that quietly. Then Donatella said, Why did you leave school? Elias reached into his jacket pocket and turned his phone toward her. On the screen, a photograph. A girl in a white dress, in a casket, 14 years old, a gap-toothed smile that had not entirely left her face even then. On the mantelpiece behind her, a spiral notebook covered in purple marker. Same symptoms, he said. Same progression, same time of day. Earlier generation AI system, different model, same firmware architecture. The exhaust failsafe was flagged for a patch that was never applied. Donatella looked at the photograph. Her jaw moved once, then stopped. Because I approved the budget reduction, she said slowly, to protect the launch timeline. It was not the same as Celeste's deliberate concealment, but Donatella Harrington, whatever her faults, did not look away from things she had done. Elias met her eyes. "Now you see," he said. The monitor in Zara's room began alarming at 10:47 in the morning. Elias was moving before the intercom announcement finished. Not running, because running in hospitals creates the wrong kind of energy, but walking with the speed of a man who already knows every corridor in the building. A crash cart rolled past, then 2 nurses, then Dr. Anaya at a full run. "VFib," someone called from inside the room. Elias pushed through the door. "The defibrillator treats the rhythm," he said clearly, over the noise, to anyone who was listening. "It does not treat the cause. Her cardiac cells are still oxygen-starved at the molecular level. You need to start flushing the compound from her blood directly." Dr. Anaya turned to look at him from across the room. 1 full second. The kind where a physician weighs a career's worth of protocol against something they cannot fully explain but cannot dismiss. "Non-rebreather mask," she said. 15 liters, now." The room accelerated into the well-practiced choreography of people who know exactly what to do once someone has finally told them what to do it for. The mask went on. The oxygen flowed. The monitor continued its alarm for 43 seconds, and then, unevenly, reluctantly, the line climbed back towards something resembling normal. In the ambulance, on the way to the hyperbaric center, Donatella sat on one side of the stretcher and Elias on the other. Between them, Zara lay with the oxygen mask over her small face, her chest rising and falling in slow, careful rhythms. Donatella reached out and took her daughter's hand. Then, after a pause, she reached across and took Elias's. "You lost your job because of this," she said. "I lost my job before this," Elias said. "It's all right. I want to compensate you, whatever. I don't need money." He looked at Zara. "I lost my sister because nobody listened. Today, I just want Zara to see the sunrise." Outside, the city moved past in long gray streaks. The monitor beeped steadily, and somewhere in that sound, in its recovered quiet rhythm, something in Donatella Harrington began, very slowly, to change. But what Soledad had just uncovered about what Celeste actually did to that firmware record, not just delayed it, but erased it entirely, made everything they had already discovered look like the surface of something far deeper. Stay with us, because the recording that Darius Webb had been quietly keeping in his chest pocket is about to become the most important 42 seconds in this entire story. The hyperbaric center was the kind of clean that has no warmth in it. The pressure chamber was a long white cylinder with a small oval window that fogged steadily from the inside. Zara had been lightly sedated for the first session, standard for young patients. The pressure change could be disorienting. Donatella sat in the plastic chair beside the chamber window. She had not moved to check her phone in 40 minutes. For anyone who had worked with Donatella Harrington over the past decade, that detail alone would have stopped them cold. Elias sat 2 chairs away. Soledad had taken the seat between them, her work apron still tied at her waist. She had left Rivera's mid-morning and had not thought to remove it. Nobody mentioned it, because some things do not need mentioning. The 3 of them sat without talking, the silence of people who have been running on emergency instinct for hours and have only just stopped long enough to feel the weight of everything at once. Then Soledad said, "There is something else. I need you both to hear it." She had received a second package that morning, not from the maintenance contact who had provided the service report, from a source she would not name, a former Harrington Dynamics engineer. Contact made through a mutual acquaintance. Soledad was protecting the identity without discussion, with the calm, quiet certainty of a woman who had grown up understanding that some people can only tell the truth if they are sure they will not be punished for it. The package contained a printed log of all administrative activity on the Harrington Residence AI system over the prior 2 months. Every entry, every alert, every action taken or not taken in response. The firmware error had been flagged 48 hours before Zara was admitted. It had been deleted 36 hours before she was admitted. Not archived, not reclassified, deleted. Entry by entry, across the maintenance log. The AI camera record, the the service queue. Someone with top-level administrative credentials had gone through each one individually and removed it from existence. Celeste Whitmore's credentials. Donatella read the log, turned to the second page, then the third. She set it down on her knee without a word. Darius Webb, who had been standing near the door in the way that former EMTs stand near doors, available, unhurried, present, cleared his throat. "I had my phone in my chest pocket this morning," he said, "when she had him arrested. Old habit from my EMT days. I record situations that feel like they might need documenting later." He paused. "My grandmother always said, if you witness a wrong and you have the means to remember it accurately, you are obligated to do so." He played the recording on his phone, volume low. The echo of the hospital parking structure gave Celeste's voice an unintended largeness. "The report gets buried until after the launch. We fix it in the first post-release patch and no one ever finds it." Who is going to look through a firmware log? A pause on the recording. Then, "It will not come to that. The exposure window is narrow. We fix it after." Donatella listened to it once, all the way through. Then she set Darius's phone on her knee beside the printed log, very carefully. The way you set something down when you do not fully trust your grip. "She said exposure window," Donatella said quietly. "Yes," Soledad said. "She ran the numbers. On my daughter." Nobody answered that, because there was nothing useful to say. Through the fog on the oval chamber window, the intercom speaker on the wall crackled softly. A small voice, weak, unmistakable. "Elias?" He was out of the chair before anyone else moved. He leaned close to the microphone mounted beside the window. "I'm here." A long pause, the careful sound of a child gathering herself. "I smelled something strange. The night before I got really sick." Her voice was slow and deliberate. The way children speak when they are working hard to be understood. "I told the house voice," I said. "Nora, something smells weird." Another pause. "That is what I call her, Nora." "What did Nora say?" Elias asked quietly. "She said everything was fine." A breath. "She said, 'Sleep well, Zara. Your home is perfectly safe.'" Elias pressed his hand flat against the cool metal of the chamber casing, held it there. Donatella had come to stand beside him, close enough that her shoulder almost touched his. She was looking through the oval window at her daughter. "The voice response layer," she said, low, to herself. She overrode the warning suppression protocol in the audio output. The AI was not malfunctioning. It was instructed to report safety when the sensors said otherwise. She stopped. "She made the house lie to my daughter." Donatella stepped into the hallway and called Celeste. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The conversation was 40 seconds long. When she came back in, she sat down in the plastic chair and called her legal team. "Voluntary disclosure," she said into the phone. "Prepare everything. We go to OSHA by end of day." She hung up, then sat very still for a moment with her hands in her lap. "I approve the architecture that made it possible," she said. "The calm response override. The idea that the AI should project confidence during minor sensor alerts so residents would not panic unnecessarily. I signed off on it 18 months ago. It seemed like good design at the time." She paused. "I did not think about what would happen if someone decided to use it for something else." Elias said nothing. "I know that does not excuse it," she said. "No," he agreed gently, "but it is honest." Back in the waiting area, Elias's phone buzzed on the arm of the chair. A message from County General Hospital's HR system. Formal language. Effective immediately. His supervisor's name at the bottom. He had known it was coming. That did not make the cold of it any less real. Soledad sat beside him and put her hand over his without saying anything. The way you do for someone who does not need words. Only the fact of another person close by. After a long moment, Elias opened the voice memo app on his phone. The radio broadcast from that morning, still there, untouched, clean, every word. He looked at it for a while. "This time," he said quietly, "I am not going to keep the evidence to myself." He looked toward the chamber window, where the fog was still moving slowly. "Daisy would have said, 'Do something about it,'" he said. "So I am going to do something about it." By 9 the following morning, the recording had reached 4 million people. By noon, the comments were full of names and towns, and the particular grief of those who had spoken up and not been heard. And for whom, perhaps for the first time, someone had finally said, "We know." It happened to us too. What Zara drew when she fully woke up 3 days later. And what Elias found buried inside the AI Home 3.0 firmware that nobody else had looked for, is where this story finally turns toward the light. Stay with us. The ending of this story is the part worth waiting for, and it starts with a little girl, a crayon, and a man standing in the rain. 3 days later, Zara Harrington woke up. Not gradually, not the slow cinematic flutter of eyelashes you might expect. She woke up the way children sometimes do, all at once and completely, as though she had simply decided she was done being somewhere else and had come back. She sat up in the hospital bed, looked at her mother, and said, "I'm hungry. Can I have waffles?" Donatella laughed, the kind of laugh that happens when something enormous has been held for a very long time and has finally been set down. Dr. Anaya Patel confirmed what the imaging had already suggested: no neurological damage, no lasting cardiac effect. Zara Harrington, age 8, was entirely and completely herself. That same morning, Zara asked for paper and crayons. She drew with the careful attention of a child who takes art seriously. The picture showed a tall, lean figure standing in the rain. A uniform with a smudge on the chest. Hands that looked a little rough. Even in crayon, the figure held a piece of paper that appeared to be going soft from the rain. Behind him, the rain was rendered in 17 individual lines, blue and gray and patient. Underneath, in large, deliberate letters, "Elias is Zara's hero." A nurse brought it to him in the waiting area. Elias looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he folded it carefully in half, the way you fold something you intend to keep for the rest of your life. Donatella found him that afternoon. She sat down across from him, not with the precise practiced posture of someone projecting authority, but the way a tired person sits at the end of a long week when they have stopped performing for the day. "I want to create a smart home safety fund," she said. $1 million, independent safety audits, direct reporting channels for maintenance and field staff across every company running our systems, a review committee that cannot be overridden from above. I want you to lead it." Elias was quiet for a moment. "I don't need a title," he said. "I need you to build a system where the people who actually see the buildings, the ones who clean them, service them, notice things because they are there at 3 a.m. when no one else is. I need their reports to go somewhere real, somewhere that cannot be deleted by someone with an administrative password." He looked at his hands. "Give me the room where the decisions actually get made. Not a nameplate on a door, the room." Donatella looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said. Celeste Whitmore had retained legal counsel by the second day. Through an intermediary, carefully worded, technically deniable, a message reached Elias. She had information about Daisy's death, the original complaint filed with the county, the investigation that had been opened and quietly closed without resolution. She was prepared to surface all of it unless certain recordings remained private. Elias read the message twice. Then he called Darius, and Darius contacted the same OSHA representative already coordinating with Donatella's legal team. The radio broadcast recording and the parking garage audio were sent, within the same hour, to 3 investigative journalists, 2 public safety organizations, and the hospital board of directors. By 9 the next morning, the story had 4 million views and was climbing. The comment section was not what most viral moments look like. It was not outrage or mockery or the usual noise. It was names, towns, dates, people writing, in plain and careful sentences. about the times they had said something and been dismissed, about the neighbor who had filed 3 complaints about a faulty heating unit, about the building superintendent who had flagged a ventilation issue in writing, twice, and received no response, about all the quiet voices that had gone nowhere, page after page of them, as though something had been held back for a long time and had finally found a place to go. Dr. Anaya Patel submitted a formal proposal to the hospital board. She called it, in the memo, the Elias Protocol. Simple in the way that good ideas usually are once someone has finally said them. Every employee, regardless of title, credential, or seniority, had a direct and documented line to the Safety Review Committee. No report could be deleted, archived, or reclassified without a co-signature from an independent auditor outside the department chain. Every submission, every single one, would receive a written response within 48 hours. The board passed it without dissent. Elias, Soledad, and Darius began their first building inspection the following Monday. A commercial complex in the Mission District running an earlier version of the Harrington Dynamic System. They found 4 unreported ventilation irregularities in the first 3 hours, 2 of them significant enough to warrant immediate remediation. In the mechanical room on the building's 3rd floor, Elias crouched on the concrete with a borrowed laptop and worked through the primary firmware issue in 90 minutes. His hands moved over the keyboard with the quiet, unhurried confidence of someone finally doing the thing they were always supposed to be doing. The building supervisor watched from the doorway for a while. "You do this professionally?" he asked. Elias looked up. "I'm a janitor," he said. The supervisor considered that. "Not anymore," he said. The firmware vulnerability Elias identified was not confined to that building. It ran through the entire AI Home 3.0 line, 340,000 units across 11 states. A systemic flaw in the exhaust monitoring protocol, undetectable by standard diagnostic tools, present in every unit shipped over the prior 8 months. The OSHA brief that circulated to state safety regulators the following week used the word catastrophic in the executive summary when describing the projected failure rate over the coming winter heating season, had the flaw gone unaddressed. Donatella increased the fund to $5 million. She offered Elias the directorship formally, in writing, with full authority. At the press conference, cameras, reporters, people with very important questions, Elias Hayes stood at the microphone in a new jacket. His hands still rough at the knuckles, because some things do not change overnight, and leaned forward. "I'm not a hero," he said. "I'm a cleaner. I find the invisible risks that other people have stopped looking for. That is all I have ever done." A pause. Turns out that's enough. What happened 6 months later, on a rooftop, at first light, with a small child and a miniature generator engraved with one name, is where everything in this story finally comes full circle. Stay with us for the final chapter. This is the moment the whole story has been building toward. 6 months later, the sky above the Harrington residence went pink. Not the pale, uncertain pink of a day that has not yet decided what it wants to be. The deep, warm, confident pink of a November sunrise coming in slow and steady, the way a promise looks when it is being kept. The rooftop terrace had been Zara's idea. She had requested it 2 weeks earlier, with the careful, settled seriousness she brought to most things that mattered to her. "I want to see the sunrise," she told her mother. Elias said every darkness can end if someone is brave enough to speak up. "I want to see it end." Donatella looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she said yes. Elias arrived at 5:45 in the morning, quietly, without ceremony, in a jacket that was new but still managed to look slightly lived in, because Elias had never quite learned how to dress like he belonged in certain places, and had long since stopped worrying about it. Zara was already at the top of the stairs in her coat and scarf when he got there, practically vibrating with impatience. "You're late," she announced. "I'm 5 minutes early," he said. "I've been up since 4:30, she replied, in the tone of someone who considers this a conclusive argument. She took his hand and pulled him toward the stairs. The 3 of them stood at the rooftop railing, Zara between Elias and Donatella. and watched the light come in across the skyline. It was cold and clear. The particular stillness of early November mornings when the air has no weight to it and the world looks sharp and close, as though everything has been rinsed overnight. Zara looked up at Elias. Is this what Daisy wanted to see? He did not answer right away. He looked at the horizon, at the light coming up slow and certain and pink. And there was something in his face that was difficult to look at directly, the way the sunrise itself sometimes is. Yeah, he said finally. His voice held, barely. Exactly like this. Zara reached into the pocket of her coat. She produced a small object wrapped in tissue paper, folded at the corners the way a child folds things when she has done it herself without help. She held it out. Mom helped me pick it out, she said, but the engraving was my idea. He unwrapped it slowly. A miniature generator. Polished, solid in the hand. The kind that might sit on a desk as a keepsake. Entirely safe. Entirely still. On the side, in small clean letters, for Daisy. Elias stood at the railing for a long time with it in his hands. The pink light was on his face. Zara leaned against his arm. Donatella stood on his other side, looking out at the city. After a moment, she did something that surprised them both. She went down on one knee on the cold rooftop terrace and looked up at him. I built systems my whole life, she said, optimized every process, controlled every variable I could reach. I thought if the model was tight enough, nothing would go wrong. A pause. I forgot to listen to the people standing right in front of me. Elias looked down at her. You're listening now, he said. He reached his hand down, and she took it, and he helped her up, and she let him. Which, for anyone who had known Donatella Harrington for any length of time, was perhaps the most significant moment of everything that had happened in 6 months. On the wall of the Safety Fund office, a converted conference room on the 6th floor of a building that still smelled faintly of fresh paint, there hung one framed photograph. A girl, 14, in a white dress, a gap-toothed smile, a spiral notebook on the mantelpiece behind her, covered in purple marker. Every stray cat on the block listed carefully in a child's handwriting. Below it, in simple black letters, listen to the quiet voices. They might save a child's life. That evening, Elias sent Zara a text message, 3 words. Thank you, Zara. She replied in 12 seconds, a small red heart sticker, and underneath. In the cheerful near chaos of an 8-year-old who types fast, you saved Zara's whole world, Elias. He sat with that for a while. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city coming on in the early dark. All of it. The lit towers and the bus stops and the little shops with their signs flickering on. He held the small generator in his hand, the way you hold something you have been carrying for a very long time and have finally, carefully, found the right place for. Daisy, he whispered. I did it. This story leaves us with 3 things worth writing down. Not on a sticky note on the fridge, in the good notebook, the one you actually go back to. First, the people closest to the ground see the most. The janitor who mops at 3 a.m. notices what the executive in the corner office never will. Next time your mail carrier lingers at the door, or the young woman who bags your groceries seems off. Stop. Ask one real question, then be quiet long enough to hear the answer. Second, a busy life is not the same as a present one. Donatella had every system running except the one that mattered. If you have a grandchild coming to visit this week, put the phone in the kitchen drawer before they walk in, all the way in, not on the counter, the drawer. 1 uninterrupted hour is worth more than a dozen half-attended afternoons. Third, it is never too late to say, I was looking at the wrong thing. Not to your daughter you were too hard on in 1987. Not to the neighbor you dismissed without meaning to. Not to the quiet person in the room who had something important to say and you ran out of time. Pick one, this week. Say it out loud, over coffee, simply, without ceremony, and meaning every word. Crafted by a human, accompanied by AI. This piece hopes to leave you with one feeling, that kindness is like tiny seeds, sometimes buried under dry, cracked soil. But with just a little patience and faith, they will sprout and paint an entire sky with color.